So that was number 4, wasn't it?
That was
tip number 4.
Indeed, that was number 4.
About gestures. So can I come in with tip number 5, Tiffany?
Yeah.
So the question is, how can a non-writer craft word pictures that show, not tell?
Okay, so telling is very boring. If I say to you, Paul, outside my window is a tree, that's telling, and it's cuck. And the reason that it's cuck is because I've not given you any meaningful information so that you see in your mind the same thing I see when I look out the window.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So let's do this as a group now. There are 48 of us in the room. Let's do this. So if I say tree, I want you to write down in the chat what you immediately associate with that word, tree. So I'll start. Okay, we're seeing lots of green, silver birch, we're seeing life, we're seeing tall bushy green thing, floral, leaf, bird, branches, avo, refresh, green sunlight and wind, empty, huge, willow. Okay, you guys are amazing. Stop. Shade, love it, love it, love it. Okay, so can you see that there's a whole world of imagery going on in the chat when I say tree? Okay, and that's fine if we're playing word association, but we're not. I want you all to see the tree that is outside my window, because that would be showing, not telling. So if I say to you, not tree, but jacaranda tree, I want you to write in the chat the first thing that pops into your mind when I say jacaranda tree. Go. Overwhelmingly purple. And so what happens when you are specific is that your audience sees the same thing in their mind that you are seeing in your mind. And that is how you draw word pictures if you are not a writer. Instead of opting for the vague, which is safer, tree, you opt for the specific, which is slightly riskier, but more likely to get you a better outcome. Okay, so always go specific. If you're not a writer, try and conjure up in your reader's mind the same thing that you are seeing in your mind. But you don't want to over-egg your descriptions if you're not a confident writer. And what I mean by that is you then land up with very flowery high school style essay writing, which uses as many adjectives as possible to pad the word count, but actually no genuine description. So my advice is be specific when it really matters to the story and adds intensity and vividness and color, but don't do it just somewhere because I told you to in a webinar, right? It's got to actually be meaningful. And one of the good ways to check whether you've overdone it with your specificity and your descriptions is read it to someone else. Your own ear will tell you if it's a bit too much, and they will tell you if it's a bit too much. But take a couple of chances of specificity. So don't say small dog, say chihuahua. Don't say tall building, say skyscraper. Or if you're trying to get some geographical location, which I often do in my speeches, I'll talk about the Cinnabon in Grayston, or I'll talk about the China Bank building on the corner of X and Y, or I'll talk about, I don't know, Krispy Kreme. There seems to be a donut thing here. You can use geographic specificity. You can use seasonal specificity. You can use dialect specificity. So when I'm writing for particular audiences, I'll include elements of South African slang because it makes it feel real. And it's much better than saying, I was very afraid of the little dog. You know, rather say, I shivered when I saw the fierce chihuahua.
Yeah, so you could also perhaps use descriptive specificity. Could you do that? In other words, describing how you came out from minus 20 degrees and walked into the coffee shop, and there you saw them serving this lovely aromatic cappuccino with chocolate sprinkles on top, and that you could smell the coffee beans and that sort of thing. Is that a similar example?
Absolutely, but you have to be very careful of those adverbs. So if you are going to use modifiers, which are adjectives and adverbs, rather use good adjectives and good verbs.
Yes.
A good verbs are good action words. Don't rely on words that end in ly. Quickly, slowly, actively, formally, virtually, extremely, especially. If it ends in ly, rethink it.
Why?
Because they make us lazy in terms of our verb choices. So I would then write something like, I spoke softly instead of I whispered, or I spoke loudly instead of I shouted, or it smelled nice. What is nice?
Yeah.
Nice isn't an adverb, but it's kak. It smelled of cinnamon. Oh, okay, I know what that smells like. So now we're smelling the same thing, you and me. Okay. So you can absolutely modify, but don't modify with adverbs.
Got you. So I think that leads us to tip number 6, does it?
Tip number 6. Now, this one is one that I wanted to ask you anyway, so I'm very glad that this webinar gave me an opportunity. Let's pretend that at the end of my speech, I want to lead my audience to an action. And the action might be buying something, or believing something, or signing up for something, or just rapturous applause, whatever it is. How do I get them to do the thing at the end that I want them to do? Or how do I make them do the thing, believe the thing, buy the thing, do the thing?
Okay, so the answer is by preparing properly. And you prepare properly by, before you ever started putting your speech together, you ask yourself, who is the audience that I'm speaking to? Why did they come to listen to me? What's in it for them? Are they interested in the topic? Do I need to customize the topic to make it more interesting or more relatable for them? And when you have that information, I mean, the days of delivering a canned speech are over unless you have a very specific speech about your own personal experience and you have a way of relating it to their problem or condition. Now, what we find is often very compelling for any kind of speech or presentation is if you can identify the problem that they've got that you can solve, and you're able to tie your speech to that, you're going to come up with something that is pretty powerful and that's going to grab their attention. But it's a great idea to flag it at the beginning. You can even say to them that by the end of this address, presentation, speech, whatever it is, I will have wanted to demonstrate this to you, and I'm going to ask you to be doing a few, and you can even specify what it is depending on what it is. Now, once again, we go back to, in terms of structure, you plan your ending before you do anything else. So you come in with your central message and you say to yourself, when I'm finished the speech and I've given this particular message, what action is it that I would like the audience to take? Do I want them to vote for me? Do I want them to donate funds? Do I want them to be moved? Do I want them to take up scuba diving or mountaineering or whatever it might be? So what is the key message that you're trying to get across? And simply plan it up front, and then make sure that when you're delivering or when you're planning your speech, that you don't, I mean, you can put in supporting metaphors and examples, but make sure that you don't go so far off the track that you end up confusing your own message. Now, Churchill was a great example of somebody who would literally hit the message on the head repeatedly. We heard this again with Martin Luther King when he came up with his I Have a Dream speech. The interesting thing about that was Martin Luther King never planned to have I Have a Dream in that particular speech. But as he got to the last quarter of the speech, a woman shouted out from the crowd, I have a dream. And he actually picked up on that. And he ended up saying that 8 times in the last quarter of the speech, which then became known as the I Have a Dream speech. So that in a sense shows that you can be opportunistic on the moment. You can also be opportunistic on the day. So if there's something very dramatic that has happened on that particular day, and you've prepared your speech, but for instance, it was announced that at 4 o'clock in the morning that there were shots heard in Kiev, and that shells hit a few houses, and they could actually show images on TV of people with blood flowing down them, walking out of. You can bring that into your speech on that particular day, and it will be particularly powerful because you will show that you are current. So all these things can be done in order to make your speech more powerful. But the thing that one mustn't forget is that you need to have a clear objective, and you shouldn't have too many messages.
Yeah. So I just want to jump back a step to what you said about showing that you're current. So I saw this in action with a fellow member of the PSASA at your masterclass, because she noticed that one of our fellow attendees had a zebra print mask, an animal print. No, it was a shirt. It was a shirt that spoke about rhinos.
Yeah.
And she was so excited about spotting the shirt. And I didn't know her. I'd met her for the first time that morning. So I couldn't understand why she was so excited about this guy's shirt until she stood up to speak and brought his shirt into her speech. And I thought, oh, that's clever. That's clever. That's so clever. She just brought that in. She's such a natural. It's so amazing. And she told me that actually she's learned to do that. She looks for things in the beginning of the morning that she can weave in. So even if you don't want to go with Russia and Ukraine, because that's a thing, or it doesn't suit your theme, or it doesn't suit your topic, or you don't know enough about politics, grab something from the room that you can use to show currency and topicality and. So, it's a very, very useful tool as well for making your audience feel connected to you.
Indeed. And in a sense, what it does is it shows us that although many of us have this misconception that we are just naturally not good speakers, it's because we fail to understand that speaking well is a learned skill. But here's the remarkable thing. The more and more information there is out there, you would think that speakers are getting better and better. Well, they're not. There's the same percentage of cuck speakers as there are good speakers. And I can tell you that the amount of good speakers are very few compared to the amount of cuck speakers, if I can borrow your word there, Tiffany. Now, when it comes to slideshows, and this is also quite an interesting thing, modern technology and being able to just press a button and bang, your next slide comes up. You'd think we're all going to be master slide producers. Well, most PowerPoint or Keynote slideshows are horrendous. Too much text, too many slides, just horrible. People reading off their slides. Folk, don't do that to your audience. And the point is, there is so much tuition on that type of thing. I've written about it. I've got a chapter in each of my books about that specific thing. So we need to be students of speaking if we're going to speak. And the reason why I say this is, even if you're only delivering one speech a year, you owe it to your audience that even if they're only listening to you for half an hour, that you dish up something worth listening to. If you were to sit down at a restaurant and they just didn't bother to make the meal properly and they just bunged everything in and the pasta wasn't cooked properly and what have you, and they just dished it up to you, what are you going to think? You're going to think these people don't care. So you shouldn't do that to your audience when you're speaking.